study. And so for the month of May, the ladies at ELC are kind of taking over Bible study. We're going to be sharing some of our favorite women in the Bible. And so tonight I'm going to be joined with some amazing women of God. We still have like 3 women that's going to come on as they start the live, as we get into the live. So I hope you're ready to join us. Before we begin, I'm going to start in prayer. Father God, we thank you, Lord, just for keeping us through this week, God. We thank you for just being a God that is able to do exceedingly above all things that we can imagine, God. God, I pray as the word goes forth tonight, God, something will be spoken and shared that will penetrate the heart of the women that are connected and listen to the live tonight, Lord. And we just give you glory, God. We lay everything down, God, and we lift you up, Lord, that everything word that comes out of my mouth, God, will edify you, Lord. And just right now, we give you glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Welcome, ladies. Welcome, Miranda. Welcome, Carlette. I'm so excited you ladies are with me tonight. And I know so we've already talked about who's going to be joining us and what we're going to be talking about. So I would like, since Carlette, since you started this, since you were the first one on the live tonight, if you would share the lady that you looked up and just kind of give us some information about her and how it impacted your life and how, what nuggets that you take away from her story.
So, the woman that I'm going to speak about tonight is, she's not famous for her name, but she is Lot's wife. And in doing my research concerning her, I found for the Jewish traditions, they have given her the name of Edith. And in reading about Lot's wife, to me, she had a tremendous impact on not so necessarily much what she did, but what it represented and what it symbolized for me. So in Genesis 19:15 through 6, we see where Lot's wife comes in because she was the wife of Lot, and Lot was met by angels because the Lord was about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because it was a horrid city. It was full of sin. It was full of nastiness. And God was just like, you know what, I'm done. So he had sent some angels into town and he was, they, they warned Lot, God is about to destroy the city. Take your wife and your daughters and leave. And so we find that, everybody leaving, everybody going. And in the process of them leaving out of the city, and they're fleeing, Lot's wife turned around. Now, we can't really figure out from the Bible the reason she turned around. We can't figure out if it's because she is looking back to see like what's going on, being nosy, or if she was concerned about family that she
Looking
left
back at
behind.
all the stuff that she's losing,
Um,
she lost to her
but what
familiarity.
she turned around, God turned her into a pillar of salt. And so you'd be like, whoa, how could she make such a big impact? Well, that I looked at it from a reflection of us today as being who we are. Sometimes we will leave a situation. We leave a bad situation or we leave things behind. We get saved, we start serving God, and sometimes we will turn back and look at that and say, well, maybe I shouldn't have left, or maybe I need to go back and look for my family, or maybe I need to go look back for that thing that I had at that time because it made me feel good. But we have come to God. We have gotten saved. We have left those things behind. So what if God was the same as He did back then and turn us all to a pillar of salt? We would all be seasoning. We would all be mounds of seasoning. So I thank God for grace and for mercy because He does not do that. He gives us the opportunity to repent, and repent means to turn away from, to turn away from those things that we were a part of, those things that were not good for us, those things that may have caused us sadness. But Second Corinthians 5:17 speaks of that when you are come to Christ and you are a new creature, and all things have passed away, and behold, things are become new. So I look at it as if to say, well, yeah, I might have left something behind, but maybe it wasn't the best for me, but I came to Christ, and now those new things are for me. So that's what I took away from Lot's wife. No, she did not do something super, super great, but it was a lesson. And then if you notice that in Luke, God speaks about it again, because he talks about when he comes back again, and people are going to be living their lives and doing their things. And he warns you again, don't be like Lot's wife. Don't be caught out there, because you might be turned to a pillar of salt with her. So my woman, it was Lot's wife.
I enjoy that because when I've read the story of Lot, the Sodom and Gomorrah of Lot and his wife, and I guess I never, just looking at it, it always reminded me of how we have to have such blind faith to trust God and to walk when God gives us, when God gives us instructions. Sometimes we have that hesitation to, well, I don't know. We have all these questions, but every time I think I'm in that place, I think of Lot's wife sometimes, because the instructions were to move forward. And how many times have we had instruction to move forward, but yet we trying to pull everybody? God had already given them instruction for the family. He had already told her husband what to do. There was no reason to wonder. I mean, when God is giving the angel giving you instruction, and so it's always in me, like, when we as women, especially women of God, sometimes we can hesitate and think that, okay, is God talking to me or what's going on? And just having to remind ourselves, like, hey, when God gives me instruction to move, and don't hesitate, because what am I missing during my hesitation? So
Yeah. I just feel like I don't know. When I was younger, I used to have a book of Bible stories. And when it said how it explained Lot's wife is that she turned around to be nosy. She turned around to see what was happening behind her. And God was like, okay, disobedient. And so I think a lot of times we are disobedient, and we may not intend to be, but we are disobedient in the things that we choose to do and choose not to do for God. And if God gives you a path to follow, or he gives you a word, then some of us sometimes are like, no, Lord, I'm not ready for that. No, I don't think that's for me. But it doesn't have anything to do with us. It has to do with God's plan. And so we have to be obedient to him. And so she wasn't, and I sure don't want to be like her. No, thank you.
hey, but we have to have it. Sometimes it's important for us to see what happens if we don't follow, if we do walk in disobedience, if something, because we have to know that there's consequences for our actions. So sometimes I think we get saved and we're like, oh, everything is fine and dandy. We are new creatures in Christ, which means that you are a new creature in Christ. You have new opportunities, but in God's like, you just follow my word, example that I put before you. I love just Lot's wife for showing us how to have our not to walk in disobedience. Amen.
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 So thank you, Carlette. Thank you,
Yes, ma'am.
Carlette. I'm go ahead.
I sent it to you.
So
All right.
thank you, Carlette, for that. And we go, Miss Jack, are you ready to get started?
Yeah. Yes, I am. And the woman that I'm going to talk about today is Mary Magdalene. Now, a lot of times when we talk about Mary Magdalene, we associate her with being a prostitute. But actually, Mary was a woman of great faith, strength, dedication, leadership, loyalty, and humility. Now, Mary came from obscurity because there's not a lot known about Mary Magdalene's past. It's not a lot known about, it's nothing in there about her family or what her life was like before she encountered Christ. One of the things that we do know about her is that her last name, Magdalene, describes where she came from. And her last name also differentiated her from from all the other Marys, because Mary back then was a very common name. So what is known about Mary Magdalene is that she had a very, very hard life, and she walked down a very dark path. And when Mary Magdalene encountered Jesus, he healed her of 7 demons. And so that just shows you from the 7 demons that her suffering and her struggle was really severe. It was great. I mean, this lady was really going through something. And through Mary Magdalene, we could see that Jesus has the power to set us free and gives us our lives great purpose as long as we're living for him. And it also shows us that the enemy does not have the final say over us. And God's power is always greater than the enemy. And he can release us from the grip of darkness and use our story for good to help others. Now, in reading about Mary Magdalene, the story of the 10 lepers came to mind. When Jesus healed the 10 lepers, they all left, and then one came back to say thank you. And that was the same way with Mary. When Mary was delivered from the demons, she experienced more than a healing. What Mary had was an encounter with Jesus.
So Michelle, we're gonna look at this. I love Mary Magdalene because it shows us that we all have a past.
Right.
And so because we have a past, our past doesn't disqualify us if God has greatness on the inside of us.
Right.
We have to remember that as we going forward as women of God, because people will. It's funny when you get saved and you start going around people that or knew you before you accepted Christ in your life, and they'll begin to look at you like, oh well, we remember we was doing this last week or we did this last year. And I think when you look at the life of Mary Magdalene and how she was used in just how she was using the story of Jesus in his life and how she walked with him and how he healed her and how she was she's one of the women that's talked about in the Synoptic Gospels more than some of the apostles are. And
right.
So it does, and her past did not negate her from her posture, from what he called her to do. And we can't let our past hinder us from moving forward with God. And, I was watching a video last week and one of the pastors was preaching and she was like, everybody want Boaz as their husband, not realizing that Boaz, in his legacy, it was some women that may not have been doing everything the right way. But so you don't know who your mother-in-law was or who, in her past life. But it shows us that it doesn't matter where you start. It doesn't matter what you go through as you're going through that process. Because when you make that decision to follow Christ, when your heart is impacted and when the Holy Spirit begins to live on the inside of you, you are a new person. You're a new creature and God begins to get the glory. And he uses all of that stuff, as I always say, for us to go out. Because there's some people that I may never meet. But you, Miss Jackie, you work with kids, so you meet parents, you're able to go out and you're able to share, I'm a grandmother, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a great grandmother. And you're able to share your testimony and everything you've gone through with your marriage, with your children, and give people encouragement. And so I think that when I saw that you chose her, I was so happy because, we hide from our past for so long and we run so far from who we were, not realizing that our past collides us with our purpose and our present so that God can use us.
Yeah, and that's you pretty much summed up everything that I was going to say, because the more I dug into Mary Magdalene, the more I could relate to her, because she was a woman with a past and it wasn't pretty at all. And through her encounter with Jesus, and the more she got from him, the more she wanted from him. So she was very dedicated, very faithful. She walked with him. She served. She poured into the ministry financially. And even back then, that was kind of hard for a woman to do that, because women weren't looked at it the same way that men were. And I think that if Jesus could have named a woman as a disciple, Mary Magdalene would have been one of his disciples.
So she's a ride and die. If you look at everything she went through, like everybody oh, I want somebody that's gonna be there for me. I need Peter that's gonna fight. I need somebody that's gonna pray. I need somebody that's gonna give. Mary was a ride and die kind of woman, because she was like, I got you, Jesus.
Yeah. I don't care what was going on. In the hard times, in the good times, she was always there. She was there when he was on the cross with his mom. She was there when he was when they took him to the tomb. When he rose, she was on the outside, and he came to her and showed himself to her and told her to go and tell the disciples that he had risen. And even when he did the ascension, she was there. So Mary was on the scene. Mary was on the scene. I want to be more like Mary Magdalene, not the past Mary, the one that's happening now.
Well, you know, I think if we look at Mary Magdalene and we really study her, I think that she was able to really go hard for Jesus because of her past.
Mm-hmm.
So her past was her preparation place, that everything she had gone through with all these men, all these other things, that she knew when she knew who Jesus was. And because she knew who he was, and she understood his posture and position and his purpose and assignment on the earth, and she knew that he was the King of Kings, that when the other disciples was like, you know what, when they began to crucify, look, I don't know, nope, don't know him. She was like, nope, right. If you watch, she was right there with him through everything.
Yeah.
Through everything, constantly trying to assist, trying to aid. And we don't realize that when God is putting us in position for greater, all that stuff that we want to discount and be like, I don't know why I had so much drama in my life. My baby daddy was crazy. Ain't nobody like me. I was suicide. All that stuff that we were looking at as women, we're thinking, you know, I don't understand. But Mary Magdalene, she took all of the things that we would consider bad, and she used it for the glory of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And to think about, Jesus had 12 disciples, but he showed himself to her. And so we as women have to realize that, you know, everybody could stand and say what they're going to do, but when we're working and people may never know our name, they may never see our face, they may not even know our past. Right. But when we are in position to do great things for the kingdom, then the world will know who we are by our actions.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, you said everything that I was getting ready to say. But the best thing was what you just ended with, is that, you know, what Mary Magdalene did, she did it out of love for Jesus. She didn't do it for glory. She didn't do it for fame. She wasn't looking for a title. She wasn't looking for none of that. She just wanted to be known as a follower of Christ, and that's it.
Amen. All right, thank you, Miss Jackie. So I'm gonna try to get the questions at the end, so y'all be thinking about what we're gonna talk about at the end. And Miranda, if you're ready, I know you have a phenomenal woman that you're gonna talk about tonight.
Oh, shoot.
Me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm gonna put the headpiece in real quick because I can actually hear.
All right, Cynthia, I have you on here, so you're gonna be asking some questions, and so be taking notes, because you definitely gonna be in the recap.
Okay.
Okay, the woman that I chose Esther. Basically, from what I read and from what I learned, I guess I'll start at the beginning. Basically, it talks about, pretty much in chapter 1, it talks about King Xerxes, which is also known as King. Hold on just a minute. His actual name is King Azarus. Am I saying it right? I think I'm saying it wrong. But also known as King Xerxes. Basically, he was having a banquet, lavish banquet, decked out, everybody drinking and carrying on. And he basically wanted his queen, which is his wife, Queen Vashti, to come. He basically wanted to show off her beauty. She refused his command to come. It pretty much upset him. So he decided to divorce his queen. So he made a decree to banish her basically from the kingdom, and divorce her, that she could not show her presence in his presence again. So, you know, years passed, and it basically talks about how he missed his queen. So it was recommended that he find a new queen, so that he should basically take the virgins of the kingdom, the young virgins, bring them to the palace and basically show them off. And he chooses who he wants as his new queens. So there was this young woman, a Jew, who was at a young age, her parents had passed away, and she was raised by her cousin Mordecai, who was also a Jew. And Mordecai basically told Esther not to reveal who her true identity is, basically her nationality, that she was a Jew, because so many people disliked Jews and didn't care for Jews because of who they were. So Esther was obedient to Mordecai, came basically to the palace, was shown to King Xerxes, and he was fond of Esther. So he basically chose her as his queen. And it basically talks about how Mordecai would sit at the gates of the palace. And that's basically how he would communicate back and forth with Esther. And he happened to overhear that there were two of the king's officials that was discussing or plotting to kill the king. So Mordecai was able to pass that information to Esther. And Esther, on behalf of Mordecai, passed the information to the king, and of course gave credit to Mordecai that these men, the king's officials, were trying to kill the king. So the king basically had them dealt with, terminated, so to speak. And then he ended up choosing a guy named Haman, and basically promoted him as one of his highest officials over all his noblemen. And he decreed that anyone that is around Haman basically kneels to him and honors Haman as the high official that he was. But Mordecai refused to kneel down and give Haman the respect that the king had decreed. So when Haman found out about, Mordecai's, unwillingness to kneel down and honor him as requested, he wanted to have Mordecai terminated, but not just Mordecai. He wanted to terminate Mordecai along with the rest of his people, the Jews, when he found out what Mordecai was. So basically Haman went to the king, passed his information to the king. The king told Haman basically he can do what he wanted to do. And they made a decree, basically sent it to all the people in the kingdom that the Jews were going to be terminated, and their belongings were going to be taken. And designated a day that all of this was going to take place and happen. And of course, the Jews were upset. They were weeping. They were fasting. So Mordecai, when he found out about the news, came back to the gates of the palace and passed the information to Esther, because he wanted Esther to stop the killing of the Jews. So of course, Esther was, fearful, because basically nobody, was allowed to come to the king unless they were commanded, including the queen. So Esther basically, she did it anyway. She said, if I perish, I perish. So she was willing to make that sacrifice for Mordecai and, her people. So she approached the king. And of course, because of her beauty, the king accepted her. He didn't choose to, to do anything foul to her. Asked her what she wanted. She requested his presence and Haman's presence at a banquet that she was going to prepare for them. So the king agreed. And, Haman, excited about his promotion and, his, honors and everything that he was given by the king, he goes, they actually attend the banquet, and the king requests of Esther for her to petition basically, what is it that you wanted to ask of me? She chose not to tell the king and Haman about basically what she had to tell the king at that point in time. She requested for their presence at a second banquet. So then Haman, thought that Queen Esther was, highly in favor of him. He went home, told his wife, his friends, his family about, how highly honored he was, about, all his riches and whatnot, and how the king had honored his request to basically to kill off all the Jews. So the next day came the banquet, and actually before the banquet, Haman's wife had suggested of how he should get rid of Mordecai immediately, because basically after the first banquet, Mordecai still refused to bow down and honor Haman as the king had requested. Now, the king did not know that Mordecai was a Jew, and that was what Haman was, trying to get at, was to terminate, Mordecai and his people. So basically, before the second banquet, the king could not sleep the night before, and he requested that all basically the writings for his reign, be brought to him and read to him. And it just so happened that it came up that it reminded that Mordecai had saved the king's life from the two officials that were plotting to kill the king. So then the king started questioning, like, what did we do to honor Mordecai? And it was basically nothing that was done to honor Mordecai. So the king had spoke with Haman and requested from Haman, basically, tell me, what would you do to honor a man? And Haman basically stated what should take place. And the king told Haman that he should honor, Mordecai by parading him around the kingdom, and in robes and on king's horses and things like that. And Haman was upset because this is the same man that he wanted to impale and get rid of because of the fact that Mordecai would not honor him as the king had originally requested. So this happened. And of course, Haman goes back home and he's upset, and he's, talks to his family and his wives and his wife and everything again, about how upset he is that what the king had made him do. So basically, and at one point that I had forgotten was that Esther had basically requested from Mordecai before she went to the king, before the initial banquet, was to go back and to tell the people to fast with her, to pray for 3 days and 3 nights. And then after that was completed was when she was going to choose to approach the king about the decree that was made about killing the Jews and whatnot. So long story short, basically what happened was on the second banquet, Queen Esther had brought up the fact that Haman wanted to plot to kill Mordecai and the Jew people. And she brought to the king that she was actually a Jew. So, the king having favor over Esther, he didn't like that. So he wanted to get rid of Haman right away. So basically Haman was terminated, and he gave honor to Mordecai and put him over Haman's estate. Basically what I found from this, because I kept reading, and usually you read a book in the Bible and if it's during the time of Christ, you see things that Christ has mentioned or, God has mentioned. And I was using some other study Bibles, and it was mentioned that this is like the chapter in the Bible that God is not really literally mentioned. You don't see God in the Bible whatsoever. But it came down to it that even though you don't see God, that God is always working behind the scenes. If you go back to where I said that Esther had requested from Mordecai that they fast and they pray for 3 days and 3 nights before she would approach the king, that goes to show that God is in the works. The fact that she was able to approach the king and nothing happened to her goes to show that God is in the works. Esther was just an ordinary female, an ordinary young Jew that was nobody that was extravagant or well known, or and it goes to show that, like myself, God uses ordinary people to carry out his word. He uses ordinary people to follow through with the things that he requires of us. And also she was willing to make a sacrifice for God and for her people. As she said that, well, if I perish, I perish. So she was willing to make that sacrifice on behalf of God. And some of the things that I read and jotted down, it was basically saying our strength does not come from us, it comes from God. There's no way that Esther could have approached the king with her own strength. So it had to take God that helps her to approach the king with such information, knowing that without being commanded that she could have been terminated. And the fact that she loved others, she loved Mordecai and her people so much that she was willing to perish on behalf of them. And that's what God shows us every day. It shows that with beauty, you should not make your beauty boastful. And she wasn't. She was very humble. When they brought her to the palace, a lot of the things that they gave the other women, she didn't really request of. It was just pretty much her natural beauty that really attracted the king, and not all the extra makeup and perfumes and things like that. It says God places mentors in our life to teach us wisdom. And that goes to show that Mordecai was a mentor to Esther, and she used the advice that he gave him. And therefore, because she was obedient, the Jews were spared. And it shows that we can make an impact for generations. Now, another one of the things that I had read was that this was before the time of Christ. So if she wasn't willing to make the sacrifices that she made, that may not have paved the way for our salvation. Christ coming and dying for us on the cross, that paved the way for everything that happened thereafter, because she spared the generation of the Jews. And one more thing, it says, with God's help, we can step out in faith and fight our fears. And that was a fear that she had, but she took the faith and stepped out and did what she had to do in order to sacrifice to help the Jews. So that's basically what I had. I had some more things right now. Man, she gonna get out of control.
You know, I think it's so cute because, you know, we as mommies, we have to like, you know, just like Esther, we have to figure out how to make things happen in any situation. And so
Right.
as you were talking about Esther, and we're gonna kind of recap some more stuff, but did anyone notice, like, for a lot of the women, you know, when talk about Esther and Mary Magdalene, that they were wise women, you know, they were wise. The theme, because for you to be able to go forth and do such great things, and realizing that sometimes, you know, people, everyone say, well, I would die for this. I would, you know, put my, you know, people are so afraid to say, well, they not realize if you were in another country in our faith, we could literally die for our faith, our belief in God. And so really understanding that, are you willing to sacrifice for the greater good? And Esther was willing to put her life out there for people. And I think that's just such an amazing thing, you know. So thank you. So why'd you choose Esther?
That's a good question. I was trying to not choose someone that was common, the everyday stories that you hear. I was trying to choose someone different, and Esther was one I had not. I've heard it, but I couldn't recall. So I was like, well, let me, you know, push myself, challenge myself to learn something different.
Yeah,
so that's why I chose Esther.
Yeah, I love Esther. I love like just women in the Bible, because I really believe that we have them to look at. But who do you look at when there's no one else and you're the first person doing something?
Sorry, I'm going inside, baby.
You know, when you're the first person in, you are the trendsetter. There's no one, you know, because it's easy to say, oh, I'm going to look and I'm going to, you know, I'm going to follow this lead. I'm going to follow this example. But what about when there isn't anyone? You know, what about when you haven't seen it before as a woman, and you have to take that leap of faith? And I can only imagine with Mary Magdalene, you know, there were other women there, but there wasn't a lot of women that followed Christ the way that she did. You know, with Esther, there were a lot of women there that were being prepared and room for the king, but she was the one that stood up, and she was the one that said, you know, who had her people to fast with her for 3 days, and that she went in the fast to seek God. So, you know, how do we set ourselves out as an example as women? So I love that. And hold on. So Miss Smart, so when it was funny, are you there, Si?
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to find an outlet before my phone dies, because everything just seems like it always wants to die when I.
Let me tell you something. Whenever you're doing something for God, there's always going to be obstacles. It's always going to be challenges. I'll tell you, every time we get ready to stream something, we lose internet connection. The camera's not working. You know, there's all of these things that happen. So why you getting set aside? Let me let Cynthia go. Cynthia, can you share some things that share some with us a little bit tonight?
As far as
the one we discussed so far.
Oh, I mean, as it relates to my own life, because I can be long-winded, so I need specifics.
All right, let me see. You got 5 minutes, girl. Come on.
I
So
mean,
while we waiting on, we waiting on you. But Cynthia's gonna go ahead and share. Just kind of like talked about Lot's wife. We talked about Mary Magdalene. We talked about kind of like
I came in on the tail end of Mary Magdalene. I don't really know her story, but I did study Esther, and I remember I put it on Instagram, my take on it. My whole, how I think he did his wife wrong because she could have been doing her hair. Who knows? I don't know, but that was their culture back then. But I think that the way that Esther, she just put herself out there, like you said, she was like a very humble woman. She was a maid. She was like a maid was a nothing back then. It was just you were overlooked, overseen, or whatever. But what got her to the king was the fact that she was a virgin and she was beautiful. So that's one of the reasons why they picked her. So even the things that we think of ourselves, like, I'm not all that. I ain't got nothing going for me. Like, I ain't got no, and I don't even think she thought she was wise. This is how I look at her when I read about her.
yeah, probably not.
Yeah, I don't like, for me, I never think that I'm a wise person, but sometimes, like, I can speak up for things that I believe in, especially if I know that it's gonna help a lot of other people. And it turns out that, oh my gosh, everybody is like, thank you so much. So this happened, especially at work. We were in a meeting and they were talking about, how to help our members and blah, 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 because, they're going through stuff or whatever. And all of these high up people were there. Nobody was talking, but you had some people who was like, yeah, thank you for the good advice or whatever. And I'm sitting back rolling my eyes like, what are they talking about? So they said, any questions or comments? So I was like, yeah, yeah, I got one. So I was like, well, I really feel like it needs to be reevaluated, especially for us. I mean, yeah, we're working. Yes, we have to take care of our members, but we're members too. And you have to remember, this is not a tornado that just happened in Arkansas. This is not just, a hurricane that happened in South Florida. This is affecting everybody. And so what are you doing? What are you going to do for us to help us to not be stressed? Because you can give us all the advice in the world to help the members, but if our mental is not there, you're not going to get what you're asking for. So then they came out with this thing, like they gave us more time off of work. Like right now, they told me just don't even worry about it right now. Just your attendance ain't even in effect. I mean, it don't even matter. If you got PTO, call out as much as you want. We don't care. Take care of the kids, take care of yourself, take care of your health. And they did that for everybody. It rolled out maybe like 72 hours after that, meeting. So,
You know what? I think sometimes we may look at ourselves and we may think that we don't, because sometimes we don't see what God sees in us, and we may not always see or just not see that. And what happens is when we allow God to use us, then He enlarges our territory, and as He enlarges us and makes favor for us, those that people are connected to us are also favored. So, amen.
that point that she said that Esther was very scared. That's why she was like, fast for those 3 days. She was terrified. And I feel like in me, when I really get terrified to speak on something, like I'm shaking, I'm like, no, I'm not saying that. No, no, no. It's like the more you're like pushed to say it, at least for me. And it's like, I don't even want to say it, but it just comes out like, blah.
But you know what? I believe that we as women, and especially we as women of God, when sometimes we have to be the voice for those people that don't have a voice, and we have to be the voice of those people that are afraid to use their voice. And so, just as Esther, somebody had to go forward, somebody had to stand up, and like you and your job, we never know what impact using our voice will have for other people. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Let me see. I think Miss Sai look like she's ready. Let me bring her back on, and then we're gonna recap with everyone. Tamar, are you there?
Yes, I am.
So you gonna wrap us up with Esther?
Is she sideways?
Well, I am sideways because my phone is charging, and yeah, everything seems to want to die when I want to do something. Hold on 1 second. Let me get my little thing here. Okay, so like I was just kind of reading. I think I like misinterpret like what the question was when First Lady sent it to me, but then once I realized like who would influence me, and reading like a little
I think we're losing me.
of just Esther break the intimidation, to bring influence to glorify God. And I just think about that, like for me, like that's my biggest like goal, is to like women that, you know, feel discouraged in their purpose, or feel like, you know, they can't do something or seek God or get right with God because they're struggling with, you know, things of their past, or just things that they feel like they messed up and God is not gonna go with, where like I always doubt myself. And even though people see things in me, like I never saw those things in me. And that's where like now in the season that I'm in, you know.
Okay. Yeah. I think you're breaking up. Can you hear us?
Hear God's voice more and more, it makes me want God where I can. Let me go outside.
All right. So I think she was saying like,
Can you hear me?
okay, I can hear you now. Can you hear us?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. So my biggest thing is, like I was saying, is that, you know, that the influence that Esther has on me is just basically to keep being obedient to what God wants me to do, and not be intimidated by what the enemy puts in my mind. Because a lot of times, you know, I know people say I'm not shy, but I really am shy until I get comfortable with a certain situation. And the thing is that God is constantly putting me in uncomfortable situations where I'll hear his voice, but then I'll be like, that person don't want to hear what I got to say. But then it's like I'll happen to say something and they'll be like, oh my God, like I need to hear that, or that's confirmation. So the influence that she has on me is just basically just staying focused on God and staying focused on what he tells me to help other women, because the thing is, we don't ever know who we're connected to. We don't know why we're connected. We don't know how long of a season we're connected. And if we just slightly close our eyes and just lose focus, we're delaying that next person, or we're even delaying ourselves. And that's one thing that God has shown me in this season, is that if I just continue to say, well, I'm not going to do what you told me to do, or I'm not going to go reach out to this person, or I'm just not going to forgive this person, or I'm not going to do this, then now I'm delaying myself and my blessings and my purpose and what I need to do, or where my destiny is going. So it's just very important to be wise in who you're connected to, who you need to release, who you need to reach out to. You know what I mean? So that's the influence that she has on me.
Yeah. So I think like with all of us with Esther, it was just so, I mean, you're right, because when Sai was just speaking, if she would have decided, hey, I'm afraid to go before the king. I'm afraid to share my heart. I'm afraid to do this thing. How many, an entire generation could have perished because she didn't stand up, or she didn't do what needed to be done. And so I think as we look at Esther, all of us have had those Esther moments where we should have gone forward, and we knew we needed to go forward, but fear was so paralyzing in us because we didn't know, like, what if I die? What if this happens? Not realizing that if we just do what God calls us to do, he's already made provision in whatever that provision may look like. And as I get older, I realize, as we've going through this COVID-19 thing, that, when you are with Christ, then if you like, my thing is, if you don't get this thing, you're good. If you do get it, you're good. Whatever happens, we're still good because God has us and he's going to protect and keep and heal us. So, I just love how we, I just love that. And let me see. Miranda, do you have anything else you wanted to say? Because I know the baby was crying a little bit. Anything you want to share with us before we move back on to Miss Jackie and Carlette for closing out?
I think this is just a reminder with all these influential women that women are also made in the image of God. And also that women are called to rule and have dominion as well. So it's, even if you don't have that mentor or you don't have that supportive, other half or spouse, that, I mean, even if you don't have somebody else that's there, an earth being that you can depend on, there's always God. So like what Esther did, fasting and praying. If anything else, always take it to God. Amen. And that he will always direct our paths.
Amen. And one thing I want to remind us about too, something I was missing on Sunday about we as women, like, when God created Adam, he knew he had created something great, but he went back and he thought about us as women, and he was intentional when he went back in and created us. And so if God took so much time to go back and create something so magnificent as woman and present her to man, then he took time to think about us. And so because that, he deposited so much greatness in us, and we have to walk in that greatness throughout, and as Miranda said, sometimes we may have mentors, sometimes we may have to encourage ourselves, sometimes we may be in situations that we have to trust God, that there is nothing else that we can do. But we always have to remember that if God called us to do something great for the kingdom, he's already prepared us. That even we may have fear, we may be nervous about some things, but when God has prepared you, then we can't be like Lot's wife, right, Carlette?
No, we can't be like Lot's wife and turn back and look back and wonder if we've made the right choice or the right decision. We have to go forward in God and trust that God has the best for us.
Oh, my bad.
And then what if we are like Lot's wife? And what if we turn back and we miss what God is doing because we were so busy worried about what was behind us that we didn't embrace what was in front of us?
Don't know about that. Don't know about me.
And so even Miss Jackie, I'm going to get back to you with Mary Magdalene before I love when you discuss Mary, because I don't think a lot of people really know her story. They look at just her past, and they didn't realize what impact she had on, on Jesus and how she was there,
Yeah, and what we have to realize is the same thing that we had talked about, is that we all have a past. Everybody has one. We all came from something. None of us were born saved. None of us. But we just have to remember that, when we come to Christ and we surrender to him and he releases us from our past, that, we can, just like the scripture says, we can do all things through Christ. So, we just had to stick close to him, just like Mary Magdalene did. She stuck close. The more she got out of Christ, the more that she wanted. So that's the way we have to be. And we just have to remember that he is our strength. He restores us. And there's nothing, and it doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter about your name. It's just like what I had said earlier. The best thing to be known by, the best name to be called, is a child of God.
Amen. Amen. I want to thank you all for just
one of the things to like piggyback to that though is that all our past has purpose. Like when you mess up or you're learning a lesson in the trials that you're going through, you learn the biggest lesson, and you the next person that comes along, you can advise them and give them wisdom by what God brought you through, because all our pain and our mistakes and everything that we've gone through, God brings you through. The person is struggling in their faith. Once they see that, man, if God did that for her and God brought her through this, why can't he do it for me? Like, you influence that for, you know what I'm saying, to bring other people closer to Christ, you know, and that comes with obedience, because everybody thinks they have to be perfect, but they don't. Like, their weaknesses, God brings you through those things, and your past, your mistakes, God brings you through those things for the next person. And that's how he uses us as his vessel. And when you think people are not looking at you, that very person is looking at you and your attitude and how you respond to stuff. And that's what we have to always remember. You know, how are we representing Christ?
I love it too, Sai, because I think sometimes we don't realize that people are watching how we go through stuff, you know, and so I think it's so important that we remember that we're always like, sometimes we are the church, and especially during this time, people are watching us to see what are we saying during this pandemic? Are we still trusting God? And so it's so important that we continue to maintain, because we are encouraging others, and we have no idea. You have no idea the sphere of influence that you have. None of it, you know. And someone will come and tell you, like, just like Cynthia and I was talking about her working out, and when she tags me in her workout, that encourages me to get up and get moving. You know, when I hear Carlette, if she called me or send me a funny text, you know, when I see Miss Jackie, like, we don't realize that we're all connected, and we encourage each other as we're going through this walk with Christ. And so each one of us brings something important and special to the table. And that each one of us I was talking to a friend today, and we were talking about some things that a group of us had all gone through. And it was so amazing to say, you know what? I remember when this happened, and look at and look how God restored this thing, and look how God restored that. And so I think that we miss that. And each woman, you know, God was able to use their past in their situation where the kingdom of God was glorified. God, he got the glory, and it didn't matter what their past looked like. As a matter of fact, I think their past was the trigger for them, and the preparation. It was the place that he had them so that they could stand during the tough times.
And it's just a reminder of God's grace too, and that you're not alone.
Yeah. All right, Cindy, before we get ready to close out, you have anything you want to close out with? Some nuggets you want to drop on us?
For me?
Yes, ma'am. It's wisdom nugget.
Well, this could be for our next topic sometime, whenever you want. But I was talking to a member on the phone, and I always talk about God with our members, especially if they allow me to. So we were talking about, you know, the oils. And he was like, you know, people think that the oil is like, you know, you pray over this oil, and this oil you put on yourself and whatever, whatever. And at first I was like, but it is. That's what I'm thinking in my head. So then he pointed out to me, and he gave me the scriptures to him. But there's 3 oils. And they're not literal oils, like when you read the scriptures in the Bible about the oils, because the oils is like the oil of joy, the oil of praise, and the oil of gladness. And those are things like you give to people. Like an oil, you know how you put it on you and it sticks to you, it penetrates your skin,
Right.
and everything. Like, so that is what it was talking about the oils. And I never knew that. I always was like, I gotta put splash, like, you know, I was like, this is what you're supposed to do. But it's just a learning experience, because you gotta remember, everything in the Bible is not literal. Everything, yeah.
And that's why I want us to do this, because I think that as women tune in, and as they see us sharing different women that we just discuss every week, there's going to be nuggets of things like Lot's wife. Who knew her name was Edith? You know, because everybody like, you know what happened to Lot's wife? You know, she turned into a pillar of salt. Well, what was her name? You know what I mean? And so I'm so excited that pastors allow me to do this, because we as women get to share all those things that we learn about these amazing women who were trendsetters before trendsetting was even popular. And we get to share that with other women and share maybe something that they may not know. Other women may not know that, Cynthia. So, we don't realize the wisdom and the nuggets that we can share and deposit into other women.
Yeah,
So
I
thank
think
you
we
all
can still
so
do it
much.
because it symbolizes if you look at it and you put oil on you, like if you're praying for joy, if you just put it on you, you can look and see how it's going to be absorbed into your body, your soul. It's in there. So that's what the oils are. They're not a literal sense of oil, but we can use them to symbolize,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I know I first heard that, I was like, what? Because I
Yeah,
got
I was like, are you kidding me? So I've been greasy for no reason.
well, no, you know, it still got some use for the auto.
You got to use the you gotta really know what it's for because a lot of us, me, I really just thought it was like cross, cross, swipe, swipe, and do some praying. But
That
it's
mean,
more than
oh,
that.
that mean that we're gonna talk about this in our Thursday night women.
Yeah.
We're gonna really. So maybe that's what we'll talk about tomorrow night on Thursday night. So that look, y'all better tune in if you want to know about the oil.
Yeah.
Get ready to close out because we have about a minute left. But before I close out, y'all know Pastor's always giving me instruction, and he always like, if you on here, you go to elevation. Y'all know I cannot see. Pastor trying to get me to read stuff. So bless the Lord. What am I looking at? Oh, thank you guys for joining us tonight. Don't y'all sign off yet. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing the different ladies that you've shared. We're going to be sharing all month with different ladies from the ministry. Just, because this isn't about what title you hold. This is about us coming together as women just to share about all the trendsetters, all the women that are in the Bible that have encouraged us, that we may not have known about, that we can begin to look at their character traits and begin to see their past and how God used them. And we may not discount what we've gone through and know that even what we've gone through, that God is going to get the glory. And so, also, if you guys, we are still a church. So if you guys want to sow a seed, do your tithes and offering, you can go to Elevation Life Center online is eLife Center, or you can go on our app and you can sow your seed there. And what else? And then I'm going to pray for everyone and just thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, ladies. I so appreciate you. I honor you tonight for just your time and sacrificing, and I'm so grateful. And you guys don't disconnect once I finish praying. Okay, we're going to turn the live off, but we'll still be here. God, I thank you, Lord, for every woman represented, every family, Lord. I thank you for the women that we discussed tonight, God. I thank you for the nuggets that you deposited each one of us, Lord. That as we spent the private time, God, just going deep in your word, God, so that we can be stronger and that we can share your word with others, Lord. God, I pray for our country. I pray for our leaders, God. I pray, Father God, as we're going through this pandemic, God, that you just keeping us covered, God, that you are Psalms 91, God, that even as it goes by our doorposts, God, that we're safe, God, because you cover us, Lord. And God, I thank you for the children as they're out, God. I pray for peace in their lives. I thank you for teachers that are still teaching them, God. I pray for just, God, for just our country as a whole, God. That as we go through this, as we're in this place in this season, God, that you continue to just show yourself mighty, God. Show yourself great, God. God, we know that you are a God that can heal, God. We know that you are a God that you can do exceedingly above all that we can even imagine, Lord. And tonight we give you glory, God, for being who you are in each one of our lives. So we thank you. Thank you again for joining us. And I love you guys. And so we'll see you Sunday on the live. Okay, hold on. I don't can't.
Really?
Yes.
It takes a team.